Hello, everyone. Welcome to another episode of Spirit Coffee Talk. Today, we are chatting about the lead up to August and all of the energies around it. There's a lot of chaos, fiery feeling energy, and we get into all of the tools, or a lot of the tools that we're using, and how to look at the things coming up while also stepping away and disconnecting from the energies. So, we hope you enjoy. Welcome, everyone, to Spirit Coffee Talk. Today, it is just myself, Elyse, and Ginette, and we are mediums and channels with the Avalon Spirit group. And yeah, we're sad to be missing lovely Lisa today, but we also unintentionally color coordinated, so that's fun.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
We are bringing the energies of the goddess to everybody today. I think that's why we're wearing red.
Yes.
Um, but yeah, so we are thinking to dive right into the energies of August with you guys because as we were chatting before we hit record, there is so much whirling around in the energy. And Elyse, you had the best example of what it feels like.
It's like that moment of when you get on a roller coaster or any sort of ride or like anything like that where you're like climbing up, climbing up, climbing up, and you're like excited, but then all of a sudden you realize like, oh boy, this is scary. Oh boy. And it's like that anticipation feeling and that build up, build up, build up before you hit the peak and then
Mhm.
down off the first drop is how I'm feeling with August coming up.
Absolutely. I hear you. And I think one thing to really, with whatever ends up coming out in this conversation, I think one of the things to really balance all the pieces of info on is the knowledge and the like sovereign truth that we all have the ability to step back from the chaos energies,
Mhm.
right? Because there's going to be a lot of chaos energy. We have been in it a lot, but it's going to ramp up. There's going to be a lot more coming in August, but we can really choose to step back and observe it versus being caught up in the white waters of it. And I think that's so important to remember. So, if at any point in this conversation or any point in your journeys moving forward, whether you're watching news, talking to people, and that chaos energy starts to kind of creep in, right? That feeling of being like, oh no, to really step back from it, because that's where you get to regain your power. You can take your grounding back again and observe, knowing that you don't have to get caught in it. I think that's really important.
Yeah, I so agree. I feel like it can, and I mean, I think you and I have experienced this where you like find yourself in it and you're like, what is going on? Like it just feels way too much. And that ability to like separate from it and be like, what is mine and what isn't mine? And how can I, maybe we talk about practices in a little bit, but I think it's really dependent for everybody too. But like, what are your practices that can help you separate
Mm-hmm.
from it? Because it can be a lot in the moment.
Really.
But we do have
So,
some of that ability.
yeah. And so, speaking of these energies, like cosmically, as we were just talking to, we have Chiron. So, in astrology, Chiron is this kind of like pseudo planet type alignment, but it really represents the wounded healer, right? So, we have this triggering or this surfacing of wounds within ourselves and within society and the collective coming to the surface right now. So, if you find yourself being triggered, and I know I have been, triggered with kind of like random things that really don't matter, but they're coming back. And I'm like, what the heck? They come back for a reason for us to be able to learn something new, right? That spiral of consciousness returns back on things that have happened or ideas or understandings you have so that you can gain more. So, astrologically speaking, the stars are aligning right now with Chiron being like, hey, check this out. So you can learn more. But then we also have the energetics of how that's playing out on the planet and the collective. And we have this kind of like increasing push of COVID stuff coming up and increasing polarities of sides of pro and anti, whatever. I'm not even going to get into those, but the polarities are like both on fire. Then we also have the literal country, which is on fire, right? Many provinces are having forest fires like crazy. meaning tons of surfacing active fire-like energy. And didn't you even say Chiron is in Aries right now?
Hmm.
Yeah, and Aries is a fire sign. So fire is like explosive, hot, active, fast moving energy. And we were really feeling like August would be very fast moving,
Hmm.
with what it brings up, what it burns up, what it enlightens, what it, oh man, all of it. And to be honest, Spirit told me a little while back, about 2 weeks ago, they said August is going to come down like a ton of bricks.
Hmm.
Now, again, not to step into fear with that. It's more like there's going to be a punch to August, but you have the choice to stand back. So you don't have to be hit by the punch, but you will see it.
Hmm. I also find it really interesting that Leo is a fire sign, which we've just transitioned into, and we're both wearing red, which is traditionally quite, and I don't wear a lot of this color. It looks a lot more red on the screen. It's like a corally kind of, but like, so I feel like there's a whole lot of meat behind that push of like fiery, and typically those fiery experiences can really pack a punch or can really have a lot of weight behind them. They can feel really intense. And I keep, when I think, even just as we plan life, right, I'm looking through August at some of the things I have going on, and I keep getting this sense of it's going to go by like that. Like it's just going to be this fast moving roller coaster where it's like buckle in, do what you can, use your breath or whatever you can to support yourself through it. And also know that, like you were saying, not necessarily dropping into the fear of it
Mm-hmm.
when we hear some of those messages, but like, okay, I'm prepared. I know this might be coming. How can I support myself? What can I do? So even for me, knowing and feeling as though August is going to be this like super fast moving. And I know we've talked about this in other Spirit Coffee Talk, but the idea of like, how can I create space for myself to like take a moment? It's like the moment when the roller coaster stops and you're like, whew, okay, here we go. And then you're like, okay, I want to go again. That was actually kind of fun. And maybe it won't be that much fun, but it'll be that intensity that we need to kind of take those moments to regroup from. So for me, anyways, that's been really at the forefront of mind. Like, how do I keep that space for myself in August? So that you don't get burnt out, because I think it's important to remember, like, yes, we can separate and there's so many things we can do to support ourselves through these things. But our human bodies and our minds and our emotions, it's a lot of energy and a lot of effort for those things. So like making sure that we're resting and making sure that we're really taking that space and time for ourselves.
So how do you, I mean, maybe we can share some ideas, but like, how do you take the time and space? Like, what do you do for you to carve that out? What does it look like?
It's something that I've actually been reflecting on a lot lately, because I find it's changed a lot. Like, I know we even had a similar conversation, I think in like early June or late May, one of the first coffee talks that we did. And for me, even since then, it's shifted. So like, I think for the most important tip that I would have is, if you're somebody who has a bucket of tools and things that you can do for self-care that, or that you like to do, not necessarily defaulting to what you've always done, but taking a moment to just be like, okay, drop into your heart, asking your body, asking your spirit, asking your mind, what do you need right now? Like, of all my tools, what do you need? So for me, like, yoga is often a go-to. Um, I've lived in this house now for 2.5 years. This is the first summer that I've started doing yoga on our back deck. Don't know why. Don't know why I never did. Don't know why I'm starting now. But for some reason, it was like, I want to be in the warmth and I want to just move. And it's maybe like 20 minutes. My backyard is fairly exposed. So part of me at first was like, this isn't very like private. And I feel like people in the apartment are going to watch me and like, this will be weird. Haven't seen anybody watching me yet, but who knows? But just following with that. So that's been almost a daily practice for me, which I wasn't really even doing that much yoga prior to a couple months ago. But all of a sudden it was like, I feel that draw in. Another one for me is often it's movement, because I find when I have a lot of anxious, intense energy, to sit really still is hard. It almost can feed it, because my mind wants to focus in on that intense feeling. So for me, it often revolves around a lot of movement. or something that I can like tune into. So baths, which I know is hard because it's hot right now. So some people, it's like, that's literally the last thing I want to do. Um, yeah, and meditation, but also meditation has been challenging for me lately. So maybe that's letting go of, shitting all over myself around, oh, I should be able to just meditate quietly. And it's like, no, maybe I need some guided meditations right now because I need to take that pressure off my brain. So those are a few lately that have been important for me. And sometimes it can look like watching an amazing fluffy show on Netflix and like eating a yummy snack and like nourishing yourself that way. Um, yeah. How about you? What's been?
Yeah. Yeah, so normally my go-to would be like movement as well. And I do still find that really helps burn off the excess energy that like can create a mountain out of a molehill in my own mind. So like going for a walk, taking the dog for a walk, doing a workout, dancing, those kind of things really, really help. Um, but I've also found too, there's two kind of new things. And one of them is instead of running from the energy or trying to use the tools because these are the tools that work and they should work and like tooling it away. I've also been learning to almost just sit in the energy for a bit first and be like, okay, energy, what is it you're wanting to tell me? Like, I realize you're triggering this, and my tools would be to journal or meditate or this, but I'm also kind of like stepping past that too now and just sitting in the energy to be like, where is this coming from? What is this here to show? Is this mine? Is this collective? And it's something a little bit newer that I'm doing. And so I'm kind of figuring it out, but I find it really interesting because there's a couple times where I've felt the energy and I'm like, oh, I'm trying to apply it to something so that I can then fix it. But in this case, it is just simply the energy. I don't need to run from it. I also don't need to fix it. It is just something I'm experiencing, kind of like if it was windy, right? You might not be cold in the wind, and you might not need to worry about your hair in the wind. So you don't have to do anything to fix it. You can just experience the wind. Right? So I've been doing that too, and I found that really interesting. And then the third thing, and I mean, for me with energies, when I feel energies come in, it's usually because there's a message of some sort. But what I've been doing too is I'll tune in and respond to the energy. If there's a message, I get it out, it's there. But if there isn't, then I don't keep pushing. Right? Again, I'll just try and acknowledge the energy. So I've been noticing that a little bit, and I think that's going to be a big piece for lightworkers specifically about August. Is like, yes, it's going to be triggering and bring up things which you can use your tools and work and whatever. But I think lightworkers and sensitives are also just going to be feeling a lot. So if we compare it to wind, August is just going to be windy. Right? Energetically speaking, it's going to be windy. So we're going to feel a lot more than we need to actually figure out and save ourselves from.
Yeah, I like that you said that. I think that sometimes in the spiritual community overall, there can be a message of like light and love. And I feel like sometimes that detracts from, sometimes we just need to like be in it and feel it. And sometimes it is ours to feel and sometimes it's not ours to feel. But how can we differentiate the two if we don't actually like look it in the face and be like, hey, why are you here? And that's really uncomfortable, but it's important and it's part of the human experience. And I know that's something I've been doing too. And I've noticed when you stop, that's when you can create the separation of, oh, I don't actually think this is mine. Like I'm feeling a lot of anxiety scanning my environment and I can feel my brain looking for the thing that I'm anxious about. And then all of a sudden, when you take that moment to be like, okay, what is actually happening here? I'm like, no, everything's okay. Like, I don't need to be trying to piece this together because it's not actually mine. It's just what's going on. Yeah. And I really love that. And I think I was talking to a friend of mine who's a light worker as well. And, she was like, I'm just so tired of this, all of this. And I just want to know and understand. And I think as folks in that environment, we often we're used to being able to like tune in and be like, hey, what's going on? Get some understanding, get some guidance. And right now we're like in a tornado. It's extra windy and there's not a lot of information coming through. And that's been a really, I think, challenging thing for myself. I know you and I have talked about that. And also other people that I've talked to, where it's like, we're not used to that not knowing. And that's making it that much more exhausting, I think, for us. And so how can we take that pressure off a little bit to like figure it out and just allow ourselves to be in it, and then maybe that'll move it, or then use your practices to
Yeah.
support yourself after the fact.
And I think too, it's important to say that even with, so with all those energies, we're also dealing with like, so we have the collective energies, we have the cosmic energies of Chiron, we have our own energies, but then we also have Earth's energies right now, which are really active again with like all the forest fires. But the other one too was earthquake, and this is an interesting experience. I think it was back in May. I might have talked about it on my podcast or on one of these, I'm not sure. But in May, there was this big push that July, August, there would be a lot of activity, a lot of stuff happening, big events, earth events. And I kept feeling like was feeling fires, but I was also feeling earthquake. That's happened a couple times and nothing quite shows up. But this time, just 2 days ago, there was an 8.2 earthquake in Alaska.
Mm.
And that night, all the energy, like the night that it happened, I think it was around midnight, 11:30 or midnight. That evening at around 8 o'clock, all my energy got sucked right out and I had to go to sleep. And I was like, this is interesting. And before I would have thought, what's going on? Is there a spirit message? Am I sick? All these different things. But I was just like, I was able to step back and observe. And I'm like, there's something going on and my energy is needed elsewhere. I'm just going to give into it. So without needing to figure out what it was, I just gave into it. It was interesting that there was then that big earthquake, but it was interesting that the big earthquake happened in a place where it didn't cause, as much as I know right now, a whole ton of damage. It didn't cause any tsunamis. Like there were tsunami warnings, but then they took them all down. It didn't cause as much chaos as it could have. But I think what the earth is doing is showing like, listen, there's a lot that's going to be shifting and there's a lot that I can do. Like, wake up, people, also. Right? And so I say that because I think we are also feeling a lot of what the earth is doing also on top of it. So like we have energies coming at us as light workers and sensitives from every angle, literally underneath us, above us, and all around us. Right? So to be able to step back and tune into those, feel into what we can, step back from what we can, I think is so imperative so that we don't feel like we're totally sinking through August.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah, I really feel that. Something came into my brain and now it's gone.
This is August, my friends.
I'm like, oh, there's all these things coming in that I have to share. And I'm like, wait, what was that?
Fun.
Okay.
I know.
Refresh my memory in a minute.
Okay. Yeah. So, well, then here's another thought that I had too. And when your thoughts come back in, just jump right in. But in my podcast, I talked about a download I had and I shared it with you from Sanat Kumara, who's an ascended master, about the fear narrative, right? And that the fear narrative was going to be really pushed strong from many angles too, right? And think about it. The wounded healer brings up fears, discomfort, right? Mother Earth being on fire, floods, earthquakes, that brings up fears. And then you have the collective with the polarity of opinions and this and this and this. COVID itself, fear, right? So we have fear pushing on humanity and each and every one of us from many different levels right now. And so the more that we can really recognize that, like consciously, like in daily life, be like, hey, there is a fear narrative coming at every angle. Now, you don't have to sink from it, but if you're aware of it, then you can start to ask yourself, like, what's happening? What does this mean for me? Do I actually need to be afraid? And start to morph out of it, because the way I understand it is it's kind of putting the squeeze on all of us so that it can, like, in a sense, show us the gunk, like squeeze out all the gunk so we can see it and then step up in consciousness from it and learn to be choosing more consciously. But that's if we don't get caught up in the fear turbulence happening.
Yeah. Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. And I remember what was coming through. So for me, I mean, I remember, gosh, talking to you in like December about June. June was like a big black dark hole. And for me, when I like get hung up on something, there's something to it, especially if it's like future or like I get it's almost a little bit obsessive. Like I can't let it go. And it just is like playing on repeat in my mind. Oh, dragonfly. Um, and I couldn't get I felt like June was this black hole that like I couldn't see life past. Like I just, it's like if I wanted to plan my summer out, I couldn't do it if I wanted to. And I'm feeling that with September now. And it's been like that for a little bit where I can kind of see what's happening in September, but past that, it's like I just don't know what is happening. And I kind of am getting a sense that like whatever comes up and the bricks that fall or maybe foundations that crumble or whatever that looks like, whatever happens in August, September is going to be this month of like, okay, what do we do now with the stuff that has happened? And then potentially maybe we're stepping into a new timeline, which I know there's been a lot of murkiness around what timelines even are right now, because it's changing so rapidly. And I wonder if for that last kind of quarter of the year, October through end of December, if then we're on a new piece. Because if we think about it too, then leading up to the winter solstice again, that's when like the tables turned and everything kind of flipped on its head. And so I'm wondering if then, there's a couple months of like, hey, world, humanity, consciousness, earth, everybody, what are we doing now? Move through those things through the last quarter of the year. And then based on that, we hit the solstice and then see where we go in 2022.
It's interesting you say that because they had told me back in June that they could give us predictions, so to speak, up until October. And that October would hit a new potential totally based on the choices made by humanity within these months now. So that makes a lot of sense that like August comes down with whatever it is. September, we're like, okay, what are we going to do with it? So September gives us the time to figure that out. And then that determines which way we go come October until the solstice again. So that makes a lot of sense to me with what you're saying. Yeah.
Yeah. And I don't know about you, I'm still kind of in a space where when I check in and tune in and feel into like, okay, what's coming, like even just personally, like, we're planning a trip in September and there was pieces of me that were like, okay, is everything going to be good? Like, are we going to be able to still travel? Just like little life stuff that I would normally kind of tune in and feel like, oh, how does this feel for me? I'm not getting a whole lot. And the only kind of recurrent message that I get, like there's little snippets here and there that differ from this or in addition to it. But the main thing that keeps kind of coming through is like, just try, we're still here. Like, we know that you feel kind of in the abyss right now, but like, we're still here. We're doing our best. We're working with you and trying to support humanity. But it just feels like a lot of moving pieces. And so that can feel frustrating because it's like, just trust. And the human self wants to be like, trust what? Like, what's happening? But it's that, when I drop back into kind of the heart and the undercurrent, as we've often talked about, what's there? Well, it actually feels okay, even though everything else is so chaotic.
Yeah.
If I can find something to center myself or a way in which I center myself, I usually can feel that peacefulness underneath. It just is all of the chaos kind of on top that clouds us from it.
Yeah, I agree. And I love that you're saying that because I feel that too. I really do. I feel like even though we can't quite see exactly how it is, we are in the big picture moving in the right direction somehow. And that things are going to work out. Like I believe that. And a couple times I asked myself, I'm like, am I just being naive? Am I being like all like, rainbows and roses and all this? And I'm like, no, at the core, like you said, at the undercurrent, I really believe in the potential of where we're going. I really do. So that's great that you're getting that. And I think that's a really important message for everyone to hear with everything that's going on. The undercurrent is still leading us into this right direction.
Mhm.
We're going to get there somehow, but like with the universal happenings of anything, there's always 9 million different pathways to get us to where we need to go,
Mhm.
right? So,
And usually that initial the phase right before things kind of drop into flow, or like no matter what you're looking at, if you're trying to like achieve something, or you're healing, or you've got something going on in your life, that moment, or the moments leading up to when the shift happens, or when you all of a sudden are like, oh my gosh, it's getting better, or it's happening, or it's working, in the way I thought it would, or I'm moving towards this thing, or I'm healing, those are the worst ones. So like we can look around and be like, there's so much happening in the world, there's so much injustice, there's so many racial discrimination issues, there's health issues, there's all of these things, mother earth, climate change, like all of the things, right? There's a million and one things that we could look at and say, oh my gosh, it feels like everything is falling apart. And yet my feeling is that it's falling apart to then, as we step into this next phase, you actually rebuild it. You can't tear down, or you can't, you know, manicure and like surface level a house with a rotten foundation and rotten walls and mold. Like you can't, it's not going to fix it. The toxins, the crap is still going to be there. That breakdown has to happen, but while we're in it, we're like, oh my
oh my
gosh,
gosh.
what is happening? Feels
Yeah.
like everything's falling apart.
Yeah. But that's totally what Spirit said back in 20 or at the beginning of 2021. They
Mm-hmm.
said 2021 would be about exposure and bringing to surface things. And I remember they showed this image of like a wave coming in, and say there's like all this um, like garbage in the ocean, right? And it pushes it all into shore, and then the wave recedes, and then you're left to see all the garbage on the shore. But then you can clean it up,
Mm-hmm.
right? And that's what 2021 was going to be about. And I think we just didn't realize all the ways in which that would happen. And I think also the spirit world didn't realize all the ways in which it would happen too. I think they had the general idea, but I think even on some of the higher dimensional levels, they've had to also realign plans and paths and stuff as we've gone along to keep this moving in that direction.
Mm-hmm.
I really think so. So I
Mm-hmm.
mean, that being said, I think we're going to see more revelations of things, more things revealed and brought to the surface. But like you said, if you're going to build a new home, you need to take out all the gunk. You can't build over mold and think it's going to go away, right? Like, it's exactly that. So I think that's a really neat way to look at everything and look at the energies of August and what comes after. That it's like the destruction to clean it out.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. And even when you think of like forest fires and things like that, well, really forest fires, they, while they're devastating and, terrible things, people can lose their homes or lives lost even. Um, the aftermath of that is that the forest floor is renewed and there's nutrients that are returned, and it's this like rebirth process,
Mm-hmm.
um, that yeah. And even as I'm talking about that, I'm like, and we're in a fire sign right now, and the healer is in Chiron, is in a fire sign, and so there's this theme of fire, especially where we live, but like just in general, I think, um
Mm-hmm.
that it feels destructive and scary and awful when it's happening, and yet there is a rebirth after it that um can be really, or is really beautiful. It's just, we have to get past that initial
Mm-hmm.
fear, shock,
Yeah.
all of the things that come with something like that.
Too, and I'm sure we'll talk about it more next week, but we are still in the lead up of the Lionsgate portal too. So we have the Lionsgate portal that peaks on August 8th. It's the 8-8 portal, and it's connected to Lionsgate, which is connected to the Sirius star system, I think.
Mm-hmm. I think
No,
so.
we just had that. I'll have to double check. For some reason I'm feeling muddled about it. But anyways, there's a big value to the Lionsgate portal. It's a big opening of consciousness and connection and higher vibrational light frequency to activate your own light code, your own consciousness, to help clear out stuff. Like, as much as we're experiencing a lot of things physically, we also have had many different cosmic alignments happening back to back to back to back to back. And right now we're in this lead up to the Lionsgate Portal, which really can help us connect to our higher selves, to our highest version of self on this planet as well. So there's a lot of energy flowing in to support us also, plus all the solar energy right now with the recent amount of solar flares and solar activity we've had. Solar light, sun's light, gives us light code information.
Mhm.
So when we're willing to kind of look beyond the chaos of what's happening, there is also a lot of support energy coming at us through these shifts and changes. And that's why I think Spirit keeps saying, like, step back from it. Do the things that pull you back from it so you don't get caught up in it, because everything is energy. And if your energy is grounded and peaceful, then you can emit that to others, ripple it out, and that has a big effect.
Mhm.
I think that's just like, I'm really loving the topic of this as we just are about to step into August, because I think
Mhm.
it's just going to be so important.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I want to put the caveat too that stepping out of the fear doesn't mean turning away from the things that are happening, because I think sometimes we are challenged with that, and then it's like, okay, I need to step out of it, therefore I'm going to turn away from it and act as if it's not happening. And a lot of there, there's things that we might not necessarily have control over, but there are, especially when we're talking about like systemic things, that we do have control over, and maybe not at a larger scale, but our actions, the way that we speak about things, the things that we learn about, those ripple out, and that has an impact on system change and
Mhm.
justice change and things like that. So I think the caveat is like, how can we, and this is something that's been a learning for me, because there are certain times and certain things that like I get fired up about, and then I realize like, okay, am I actually in a space where if I talk to somebody about this, am I actually going to be helpful? Like, am I actually going to help them maybe see a different perspective? Or no,
Mhm.
because I'm pissed and I'm like fired up and I want to just like rage about it.
Yeah.
And for me, that's not helpful. Like and maybe for some people that anger is necessary and helpful and completely justified, especially if they're at the hands of that injustice. Um, but for somebody who's not in that place, getting fired up about it isn't going to help. Having conversations, being in that fear isn't going to help. If
Mhm.
I am in a space of peace and understanding, but I'm also looking at it dead in the face to say, this is what's happening. And as a humanity, we need to look at these things and make change. Let's all do that work. That's a different energy. That's a different forward motion. And I think as we see more unearthings happening, it's like not to turn away from it, but to protect your own energy, find that peace and calmness, and then take whatever actions you're inspired to take or that are within your control.
Mhm.
Do that. Even in Alberta right now with COVID, there's been some decisions made around like, hey, you guys do you. We're not going to test people as much. If you have COVID, you don't have to stay home. And we suggest you do, but you don't have to. And when I heard that, that brought up a lot of fear in me, because I was like, what does this mean for everybody? What about for the vulnerable people? What about this? What about that? Is things going to get bad again? Like, it brought up a lot of anxiety. And I realized, like, okay, what do I have control over? Well, if I feel comfortable wearing a mask still, then I'll do that. If I, need to do X, Y, and Z, then I'll do that. And I had to like reevaluate, okay, what's within my control? I
Mhm.
don't love this. I'm not going to turn away from it and pretend it's not happening, but I'm
Mhm.
also not going to let myself sink into the fear of it. And I'm going to do what I can. I'm going to, you know, make sure that I'm being extra cautious around people who might be vulnerable, or using the hand sanitizer, whatever it looks like. What's within my scope of control to help with the real thing that is staring me right in the face, while also not letting that fear narrative like completely take over my life
Yeah.
and have more negative impacts than it really needs to.
Mhm. Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. I love that.
Mm-hmm.
Hmm. Well, I think that's a pretty good insight for this week.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Fiery Friday.
Fiery Friday.
Fiery Friday, July 30th.
Oh my gosh, yes. And you know what, too? So, just kind of in closing, I think some of the things that people can also do, which maybe is also why we're wearing red, is like really ground your energy. Ground your root chakra energy into the earth. Root chakra is red. Uh,
All about safety.
when, what's that?
It's all about safety.
Safety, yeah, security, grounding. And when you need, like, it's summertime, put your feet in the dirt, put your feet in the sand, on the grass, and just breathe. Turn everything off. breathe, and connect in. And that's going to help you feel centered and
Mhm.
grounded. So I think that's kind of an important, easy tidbit thing to do. And yeah, we'll see just, I guess, how things move through August and keep you guys in the loop of what we find out or get as we go.
Mhm.
So
Yeah.
awesome.
Awesome.
Okay, well, thank you everyone for joining us at Spirit Coffee Talk. Do check out avalonspirit.com. We have tons of great offerings. We are all on there as well, offering different services and opportunities to expand your consciousness. And if you haven't already, check out the Avalon Spirit Facebook group. There are people posting on it every day. I'm posting every day with insights, videos, making sense of life videos, you name it. And if you haven't already, do like and subscribe to the YouTube page here. We're so thankful you're watching, and we'll be back again next week.